Welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman, a podcast loaded with practical tips, powerful scripts, personal stories, and simple steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. So get ready to get the information you need to make the impact you want from someone you trust, your friend, parenting expert, Dr. Robyn Silverman.
Hello and welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything, where we give you the tips, scripts, stories, and steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. I'm so honored to be your host, Dr. Robyn Silverman, child and teen development specialist, author and speaker, and most importantly, parent of two great kids who give me the opportunity to love, learn, and grow every single day, whether I want to or not. Believe me, I get it. It's not always easy, but we're in this together and we have some great people helping us along the way. Now, how do we raise good humans? Do some parents just get lucky with easy children, or perhaps they have some kind of special superpower to know what to do? Are there steps to follow, specific things to avoid? You probably all know by now from listening to this podcast that reading all the books, well, we're supposed to yell, hit, or ignore a child into being good. So what is the secret sauce? For this, we have invited Dr. Aliza Pressman on the show today. Dr. Aliza is a developmental psychologist with over 15 years of experience working with families. After co-founding SeedlingsGroup and the Mount Sinai Parenting Center, she began the Raising Good Humans podcast to bring the latest research on child development directly to parents. She's bringing her expertise and backgrounds to listeners every single week and starting a new community around evidence-based parenting practices. Dr. Aliza is an assistant clinical professor in the Division of Behavioral Health Department of Pediatrics at Mount Sinai Hospital, where she's the co-founding director of the Mount Sinai Parenting Center. Welcome, Dr. Aliza, to How to Talk to Kids About Anything.
Hello, thank you.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. Very exciting, podcast host to podcast host. But before we jump into how to raise good humans, which you've become a specialist in, can you tell us one thing that lights you up and got you so interested in helping people raise good humans?
I think what really lights me up is just people. I just am so utterly fascinated by how we come to be who we are. And when I was younger, I actually failed Psych 1 in undergrad. So I freshman fall at Dartmouth, I took Psych 101 because I was like, I love people. This will be interesting. And then I really don't know what happened. I think I thought it was like a survey course that nobody would notice if I showed up or not. And anyway, needless to say, I didn't think I would ever go into psychology. So I was like, well, that will be my big mistake in college. And I'll never have to think about it again. And then I, of course, figured out that I was interested in children and how they come to be who they are and what are the ways that we can help support kids. And there's so much that's not in our control. And so what I took a few classes to make up for the fact that I had failed Psych 1
oh my gosh,
in undergrad. So I had to take some classes before I applied to graduate school. And I took like all the intro classes to the arms of psychology. And I took abnormal and counseling.
Oh, I loved abnormal.
All of them. And so when I got to developmental, I was like, it was like speed dating. I just fell in love because I learned about Bowlby and attachment theory and about different kinds of Erik Erikson. And this is all means nothing to anybody except for you. But I just got super excited that people had spent so much time learning about this unfolding of the human. And I just started to think how cool that there is this one environmental influence that actually does make a difference, because obviously biology is a huge thing. And it was parents and caregivers. And so I just got so obsessed with how we come to be who we are and how those environmental influences might help support or prohibit that development. And then I got pregnant while I was doing research. And so I started to think about, I actually had a colleague who was also pregnant at the same time. We kept going to each other with questions and thoughts. And then we thought it would be so nice to have access to this research, but not have to be in a dusty, academic journal or in the archives somewhere, but actually at your fingertips, what's relevant and what's really just interesting, but not super relevant. And that was kind of that's the most long-winded answer, but I just thought it was so fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you just plugged in and then it was ready to go. It sounds like it was like a match made in heaven for you.
It really was. But I mean, after many years of not knowing what I was doing, but being super interested in, just starting to realize, as we do in our 20s, like what gets us excited and what lights us up.
Yeah.
And then of course I had kids and I was just like, what?
Yeah.
And also just compassion for parents.
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
it's very humbling.
It's so humbling, and it doesn't matter how much you know.
It really doesn't. I feel like people ask me that a lot. They'll be like, your children are so lucky. Like, wow. And you're so lucky to know so much. Like your children must be so well behaved and they must just be so like, they're really easy. And I was like, what? No, I said, you ask me anything about your children and I can talk to you about that. I will probably have lots of takeaways for you, but in my own house, I feel like I know nothing half the time. I am like, because it's so emotional, right? Like, you're like, I know how to raise good humans in the same way that I know how to talk to kids about tough topics. But when you're in the moment with your
really
own
different.
child and the emotions are there and the frustration is there, and you're so invested, it's very hard to stay clear. And I still have the voice right here in the back of my head. Like, usually I'll do something and I'll be like, hey, is that really the best you can do? And I'm like, in that moment, yeah, that's what I had in that moment. And that's just the honest feeling. Do you feel like that too?
Of course. I often, because I used to do these, I mean, this sounds horrible, but these assessments of parents, even before I was a parent, where you'd score like how they're doing in these interactions with their babies, toddlers, young children, when you went back when that was something, at an age when you could do that. And then once I had kids, I would often have this voice in my head, like I would give myself a score of highly intrusive, like,
yeah, you failed.
I failed, basically. But I also, I think the benefit of this work is that I'm completely, I buy into the idea that we are not meant to be perfect. And so my failures are opportunities to show my kids that, there is no expectation, no matter what, that we're going to get anything right all of the time. And so I might be too easy on myself because of that, but I do have that voice all the time. Like if somebody were watching, and my kids, because I have teenagers,
same.
Very often, when I do say or do something that is in complete contradiction to something that I might have said, they'll point it out and they'll say, would you like to put this on your website?
Yeah, it's like so humbling.
Yeah, so it's
so
kind
humbling. Yeah, we do our best, but it's far from perfect. I was curious because of who you are and what you do. If you had the chance to be able to equip parents with like 1 to 3 tools that like anybody could use at will, like they had it, they knew it, and they had it in their parenting tool belt in order to raise good humans, what would those tools be?
Okay, well, first I'd say one of the tools is figure out what good human means to you, because it's not going to mean the same thing to me as it does to you, as it does to someone else. And so figuring out like, what's your North Star? What do you want your kids to say about you or your values when they're looking back on life? what mattered to you for them and what matters to them. That to me is the first thing you need to do so that you always have something to kind of go back to. And then you can say, like, in my dealing with this particular challenge, what's most important, like in the big picture of things. And if I can figure out, like, how is my response aligned with my values, then you can keep yourself from getting swept up in what someone else is saying or pressures from your community that don't necessarily align with your values or whatever it is. And so I think the first thing is really just getting to know our mission statement.
What, for example, is yours? Like for you in your family, what does it mean to raise a good human?
Well, so I'll say I don't, and I struggle with this because I have to write about this a lot. I don't say what mine is, my sort of mission statement of like parenting values. And that's only because I don't want to do that to people. Like I don't want, it's not that I'm trying to be secretive, like I have some secret answer that's so special. It's more like if any of us says, like, you know, kind, curious, passionate, I'm just making things up, like, will that somehow accidentally influence anyone?
I mean, it's not a bad thing. Kind, curious, and passionate. I would be like, hey, that's not bad.
That works.
You know, I mean, it works. It's just if you're saying things that, you know, are contradictory to their values, maybe.
Yeah, if it's contradictory to somebody else's values, or if they're like, you know, these are my top 3, because you could have lots of values, but your top 3 or 4 that you really think, like, if my kid grows up and has a sense of X, Y, and Z, I feel like I did the work I needed to do.
Right.
That to me is like less important what mine might be, yours might be, because I don't think any of us can quantify that, like, what good means, but we all know in our hearts what it is for us. We just do. It's like, you get it, but you can't really say that someone else is going to have the same thing. Although I think people are more aligned than not when you really.
I think so. I mean, I feel like, you know, that word, like kindness, for example, like, I mean, I think a majority of people would say, yeah, I think that that's a, you know, a good thing for kids.
It's like a good one. But I've had clients who have said, kindness isn't in my top priority because kind people don't necessarily, you know, have the drive and the persistence and the sort of sense of assertiveness that maybe I want. I don't want them to be walked all over, whatever it is that they associate with kind. But I agree, like, kind is definitely up there. So anyway, I would say finding whatever that is. And then if you can't, I think it's fun to do if you have a partner, to sit down and, like, you can, there's a pretty common psych exercise of journaling for 5 minutes. Kind of, if you look back, what would you want your kids to, how would you want your kids to describe you? That's not, you know, and anything sort of like that. How would you want others to describe you? And then after you've just written freely for 5 minutes, circle the words that stand out for you. It's a very easy way to find your kind of North Star for parenting, because
love that.
You know, if you think, okay, I pulled out these 5 words, but my focus is on my kids' grades and whether they're, you know, which again, maybe your thing is education and whatever. And so
achievement or something.
And that is aligned. So there's no judgment. Right. You just want to make sure that when you pull out those words of your free-form thinking, that you get to a life that you are living today with your kids. So that would be my first thing. And the second thing is breathing. I think we probably, you know, if we can practice not making any decision unless there's danger, imminent danger, and then of course you don't have time for anything, you have to go right to your stress response. But there's no danger and it's like you can take a pause. The best tool in your toolkit is to say nothing and just take a breath and decide how you want to respond. And you just can't decide how you want to respond if you don't take a breath. You'll end up being reactive, and then and then I think the third big tool is to, I mean, these are very I mean, repairing those relationships and forgiving yourself when you make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to say a very cheesy line.
I love
All
cheesy.
feelings, it's pretty cheesy. All feelings are welcome, all behaviors are not. And
Yes.
I do really feel like that's another easy tool, because you can ask yourself, like, I'm dealing with this situation with, I don't know, my 6-year-old came home and dumped their backpack on their sister's bed and like made a mess. I don't know. I just don't know where they came from. But so so it looks like that child's feelings, like in anger, let's say this was an angry kid and they just did something angry, but it was harmful to someone else or disrespectful or whatever. You can ask yourself, like, am I welcoming the feeling? Okay, I'm naming it. You're feeling this way. You can validate that feeling. And also, all behaviors are not welcome. So, okay, that's not something I can let you do, even if you're feeling this way. So let's put guardrails up and some limits. And then you kind of know how to answer all of your conundrums, because you've taken a breath, have welcomed the feeling, and then decided what the limit is, so that you make sure that there are some guardrails around the behavior.
So if you were, let's flip this, if you were able to eradicate one thing that you feel like parents sometimes go to when a child is misbehaving, or to get them to behave or comply or unquote seem good, right? Seem good, not be good, but seem good. What would that be?
You know what I really think should be eradicated is like forced early, this is for earlier childhood, because I think later childhood things get a little bit more sophisticated, but like with young children, the auto response of like dragging a kid over to force an apology, because I think that it does exactly, like, it makes you look like you did good and you're forgiven and all is well, but it's meaningless and doesn't teach you about empathy and doesn't teach you about what you could do in those moments. It just doesn't even make sense necessarily. It's inauthentic. I feel like that's one that I could do without.
So in that moment, since people are listening and going, oh, okay, whoops, I've been doing that. So what would you want them to do instead if they hit their sister, they threw the backpack on the bed and dumped it out in anger, they threw sand at somebody and got in their eyes? Like, what is the thing that you would want them to do in that moment, besides taking a breath, that would help them have a more positive response and help to raise good humans?
I would, once they're in a calm space, so that they're not hysterical and incapable of hearing us, I might, if they are, I would probably want to say what happened, name exactly what you observed, not with judgment, just like witness, and then say, what do you think you can do to help this kid feel better? Like when we just, they might come up with, I could say, I'm sorry. But I would want them to try to think like, okay, I did something that hurt someone else. I'm not an evil creature. Like, there's no part of this that's shaming of like, you're a bad kid, you're a great kid, you did something hurtful. What do you think you could do to help Sally feel a little bit better about this? And then see what they come up with. And I think walking them through what happened that could help support making this other person who's been harmed feel better just helps expand their empathy. And of course, some kids aren't ready for that for a day. Like, it might be, you aren't, the other kid might not want to receive that apology. The other kid might not want to receive that. I don't know, maybe you made them a flower, like, who knows? But it's just the reframing of like, let's think together about what you could do to be helpful.
Yeah. So I'm curious then, if, let's say the behavior that in that case that we were just discussing, the behavior happened once. Okay. This is like a response that happened this one time.
Yeah.
What now, when often when adults get really triggered and frustrated, they're seeing unkind behavior that's happening maybe over and over, right?
Yeah.
Siblings arguing every day. It feels like, Groundhog Day, and calling names, peers teasing or bullying or ostracizing, children hitting and throwing toys at other children more than once. Like, we've already been through this. We already did breathing. We already did this response.
Yeah.
So what would you want parents and teachers to do when they're seeing recurring unkind behavior? Still a good kid, okay, but this is what's happening. What would you want them to do at home or at school in that kind of circumstance?
So with recurring stuff, first, I would want to know, like, what is happening in their day and in their environment that is setting them up to fail. It may be that they're not ready for certain people to be around them, or sandboxes, if it's throwing sand. Like, if you keep throwing sand in the sandbox, don't take your kid to the sandbox anymore. They're not ready for it.
Right.
They've shown you they're not ready for it. So take them somewhere with, a different sensory activity. When they get a little bit better at not throwing it at people, then you can move back to the sandbox. If they throw it, you say, it looks like you're still not ready. We'll keep practicing. And I think reminders, like prepping them in advance, you're going to the sandbox. Remember, we keep the sand in the sandbox. We can't throw it at other people. When we want to throw it, you need to, throw it outside of the bucket, into the sandbox, whatever it is, being really specific. And then I think we have to get comfortable, like, this, you're not ready for this. We're leaving. And without the guilt that we feel that we're going to somehow ruin them because they just really are so upset right now. Kids get upset. It's a bummer.
Right.
People get
And
upset.
I love the whole idea of, like, parenting for the long haul, right? I think it's like Jess Leahy maybe said that, but that you're not just parenting for that moment, right? What do you want your child to know about interacting with other people in the long run? In that moment, you feel really crappy. Like, now you have to leave. And not to mention, you were just talking to so-and-so's mom, and it was like the first time of the day, the week, that you finally are having some adult conversation. It's frustrating for everyone. I remember that so well when my kids were young. Like, you just love those, like, parenting interactions. It's hard to leave. So
it is, but this is such a long game. These little minutia moments are not meaningful themselves. They're just laying the groundwork for wiring a different way of responding. And so it's just so nice to remember, like, this is a moment. It didn't go well. We'll have many other ones. And if our response continues to be in that category of, like, or in that North Star area of, this is aligned with my hopes and dreams for this child, I think it works out. It's just a long game.
It is. And we know that parents now they're struggling with a lot. I mean, there's a lot on our shoulders these days. There's no question. This is not easy. Nobody thinks it's easy. Okay. People who are saying that it's easy. It's no. Okay. They probably either don't have kids, or I remember when I thought it was easy. It was before I had kids, right? So parents and kids are, just being honest here, struggle with screen use and mental health concerns, exposure to porn sites, consent issues, perfectionism, failure, the list goes on. And clearly this depends on age and development. Often we don't talk about these things. And I know on your podcast, certainly on my podcast, we do, broach a lot of these tougher topics. So what do you see as some of the most pressing issues? Your work in Mount Sinai, your work with people that you're doing all the time. Like, what do you see as the most pressing issues that parents need to address with kids right now? And what would you say are the top messages that you want to send parents about those issues?
Well, I mean, kind of universally, one of the things that is just getting confusing for parents is the outside messaging of in the greatest, with the best of intentions, all the support that we give parents with information, and I do it too, can sometimes overwhelm parents. And so the big thing that I wish I could like lift from parents is it is so hard. And also it's not that complicated. So there's just like the same answer to almost everything is really hard to believe. It's hard to believe that it's like validate the feeling, make sure that you've taken that breath, validate the feeling, and give specific and clear limits that are appropriate for their age and temperament.
Containerize that somehow.
That's it. Yeah. Like it's not so you could get the most complicated question or the most simple question, and the answer is pretty much the same, but it is so hard to believe that. And I think that the big thing that parents struggle with is also being okay with the range of feelings people have. Like it's so painful to watch your child experience the feelings that are not super easy, the more challenging feelings.
Yeah.
And so if parents could believe that challenging feelings are not the end of the world, and that actually knowing that they're as temporary as our happy feelings, we would be a lot more confident as parents.
That's such a moment there. I just want to highlight that they're just as temporary as those good feelings. It can be fleeting. We sometimes do see it, right? Like our kids really angry, and we're like thinking about it, and we're like ruminating about it, and we're like going over what happened and what did we do and what did we say and where did things go wrong. And then they turn the corner and all of a sudden they're like, okay, I'm going to go outside and go ride my bike with so-and-so. And you're like, you were just furious with so-and-so. Like you've just crushed yourself over it.
Crushed.
Right.
It's so, but like when your kids are laughing hysterically and giggling, you're not like, oh God, they're going to be happy forever now.
No, just wait. You're like, wait, they're laughing too much. This is going to go wrong really soon.
So it's just, I think that would lift so much from parents to not be so afraid. And I think that's one of the mental health conundrums is our misunderstanding about mental health as if it means that you're having easy feelings all the time. And that's not mental health.
Right. It's more of like the being able to deal with the
just being able to have the feelings.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Wow. It is much more of an eye opener. And because, parents do want to try to solve the issue as quickly as possible so that we can get rid of those bad feelings, right? As soon as possible. You're feeling bad, so let me get you the toy.
Yes.
You're feeling bad, so let's say we're sorry and move on, right? But as you were saying, even the beginning of the podcast, that when we're forcing that to happen, they're actually not learning anything valuable.
I mean, I would go as far as saying that it's cruel to kids to think that their challenging feelings are so scary for us that we have to fix them, because they go off to college, they go off into the world, and then they have these hard moments and there's nobody there to fix them. And what a gift it would be if they could go, oh God, okay, this is one of those moments. I've had them and I'm going to have more of them, but they're temporary. And they're not something that would panic the person who loves me the most in the world doesn't get scared when I have those feelings. I think it's such a service. So it actually serves us as parents so that we don't get into our spinning out into the story of awful futures. And it's also a service to our kids because they now have this familiar comfort with the rainbow of feelings that exist in the world.
I think that's beautifully said. So
easier said than done.
Well, easier said than done for sure, because they're human and we're human. And speaking of human, finish the sentence. In order to raise good humans, we must
know ourselves.
Okay, expand.
we kind of get so fixated on raising good humans, but really much of work with parents is our own self-regulation. Like if you want to know how to raise a kid who's self-regulated, what do you need? What's the biggest, like
Oh,
most highly correlated
yes.
environmental influence on self-regulation for kids, whether their parent is self-regulated?
Mm.
So I think raising good humans is really like, you know, it's not really about kids.
Oh my gosh. It's like, okay, raising good adults.
Raising good
It's
adults.
yes, raising myself. And
Because
and
we're
what
a work in progress.
right.
We're all in this. We just came to in my I mean, it's not my opinion. I think it's like if anybody that really thinks about it, you are born as a parent the day that you have your baby.
Mm,
So you're new at this too. We're all kind of new at growing this. But I do think for raising good humans, we have to have some understanding of ourselves, our hopes and dreams, our goals, what our, I hate the word triggers, but triggers are, so that we can parent our kids in a way that supports them.
mm, mm. What would you say is your top tip? What would you hope people come away with from this podcast, from the work you do, from listening to what you are saying here and on your own podcast? What would you hope people come away with when they say, I'm going to go into my house, I'm going to raise good humans? What's like the top tip you hope they come away with?
That you just have to get it right more often than not.
Mm,
And that's
not
it.
all the time.
Not all the
Yeah,
time.
not all the
And it's
time.
so true. Like
Mm,
it's definitely not just, I would say it's important to not get it right all of the time because again, what kind of a message is that? That would
right.
basically be saying there is a path to perfection. You're not
You're
good
not
enough.
on it.
Yeah. So I think just knowing more often than not that you've got this and the rest of the time that you're self-compassionate and feel same with the kids. Like we
Mm,
just have to get it right more often than not.
mm, mm, mm. Okay, and then give us the resource of the week. Where can we go to get more information about you and the work you're doing?
You can go to my podcast on Raising Good Humans. It's on
Hmm.
wherever you get your podcasts. I also have a Substack newsletter, dralizapressman.substack.com, where I think you just go to Substack and do it in the search bar.
Hmm.
And I'll have a book out next year.
So exciting. I
It's at
know.
Mount Sinai
January
Parenting Center.
2024.
January 2024. Whoop,
Yeah.
January 2024. And there are also a lot of free resources on the Mount Sinai Parenting Center website, but that is for the 0 to 5 set. So it doesn't, so it's for
Hmm.
the littles, but it's really wonderful resources.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited I got to talk to you today. I mean, I feel like we could talk about all kinds of things, like any topic, like let's go.
Let's
So
go.
let's go, let's do it. Yeah. It's just been really fun to listen to you. And anybody who's listening right now, I will write down all of these links and have them on the show notes. So don't worry if you're out running
Ah!
around town, running, actually getting go some exercise, going to pick up the kids, whatever you're doing. We got you. And I just want to thank you, Dr. Aliza, for being on the show today and sharing your wisdom on how to raise good humans. I think at the end of the day, it's really, we when we hear these words and we think there is a pathway to doing it. I think what you've shared with us is there is no one pathway. And
There is.
also, there's no perfect pathway, and that's all good. You can mess up and you can rise up and you can try again, and we can show our kids that they can do that too. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so nice. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you.
agreed. Thank you. Well, I've got my takeaways, and sweet friends, I know you have yours. So let's discuss them. You can go to the Dr. Robyn Silverman page on Facebook. We can chat about it at drrobynsilverman.com or on Twitter under Dr. Robyn. I'm also on Instagram under Dr. Robyn Silverman. I'm going to be going back and forth with Dr. Aliza, and we are going to have some great memes because boy, did she say some good things today. We're going to put them on those memes. You can share them with friends, right? We want to make sure we have that labeled right into our head, that we can make mistakes, that we can try again, that we have our North Star. So many good things that were said today. And if you love this podcast like I did, I hope you'll go up to iTunes and rate and review it. I know Dr. Aliza knows the more we get those 5-star reviews, the better off it is for everybody, because it gives great exposure for our podcast and great exposure for our guests. Dr. Aliza deserves some great exposure for all those amazing thoughts she had and all those helpful tips. Great takeaways. We want more people to be able to use them. I truly appreciate it. That's all the time we have for today, my fellow parents, leaders, and educators. Thank you so much for tuning in to How to Talk to Kids About Anything. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, you can go to drrobynsilverman.com. And don't forget, I have a book coming out in September 2023 called How to Talk to Kids About Anything. Kind of hard to forget that one because that's what you're listening to right now. And if you want the show notes to this podcast, they'll be right there up on my website under Dr. Robyn Silverman. And please remember, even on the days when you fall short, you've got this. I bet you heard some things today and you're thinking, I have messed up a bunch of times. That's okay. We all have messed up a bunch of times, and it's not easy, but there's always tomorrow. Parenting often provides that ultimate do-over. So I see you and I'm right there with you. And anything you heard today, you can go back, you can apply it. You can say, hey, can we have that conversation again? Ooh, remember, I got to remember how to frame this behavior. Okay, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to try again. We can use those Dr. Aliza words. And as there are moments when we doubt our know-how, our choices, and our sweet sanity, please know you are 10 times the parent you think you are. Until next time, this is Dr. Robyn Silverman with How to Talk to Kids About Anything. Please tune in again and keep connecting through conversation. See you next week.
You've been listening to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please visit drrobynsilverman.com.